Harper Ellison had always believed that stability was something you built slowly, brick by brick, with trust, routine, and a quiet kind of love. Her husband, Marcus Ellison, had once been the safest part of her world. He'd been the man who encouraged her when she launched her small architectural consulting firm, who celebrated her first six-figure contract, who toasted with her the day she bought an investment property in her own name. Harper came from very little. She had worked for everything she owned. And for years, Marcus seemed proud of her success until the first cracks appeared. They were small at first, the kind of things she brushed off as stress. Forgotten appointments, misplaced items, a bill she swore she paid but suddenly appeared overdue, a client email she couldn't find no matter how she searched. She blamed exhaustion, long hours, overthinking. Marcus always had a calm, comforting answer, telling her she was just overwhelmed. And at first, that made sense. But the pattern grew. Shoes moved from the closet to the entryway, her passport disappearing for 3 days before reappearing in a drawer she never used. Her laptop password inexplicably changed, then somehow fixed, everyday things slipping just outside her grasp. Harper started writing notes to herself as if she were documenting the movements of an invisible roommate. She didn't dare call it something worse. She didn't dare say the word she feared, memory loss, because the moment she would admit it, everything she built, her company, her assets, her independence could evaporate. Marcus never scolded, never accused. He simply looked at her with a soft, heavy sympathy that made her stomach twist. He would sigh quietly, shake his head as if mourning the woman she used to be, and tell her that everyone struggled as they got older. Harper was just 34. The unease grew into something colder when she caught him whispering on the phone late at night. The conversations always stopped the moment she stepped into the room. Marcus would smile and claim it was work. He'd never been secretive before. That was when her instincts, the same instincts that had built a business from nothing, whispered that something was wrong. The shift became undeniable on the morning she found the legal envelope on her desk, neatly positioned beside her coffee mug as if it belonged there. Inside was a stack of forms, transfer of ownership agreements, amendments to her business structure, and a pre-drafted financial power of attorney, all requiring her signature, all transferring control of everything she owned to Marcus. Harper stared at them for a long, breathless moment. He had never mentioned any of this, and yet the forms were filled out with confident precision, like something long planned. When she confronted him, Marcus didn't get angry. He simply acted disappointed, telling her the documents were protective measures in case her memory continued to fail. He said she was becoming forgetful, confused, disorganized. He said she had misplaced client files, sent invoices twice, left her office unlocked overnight. None of it was true, but he spoke it all so calmly, so gently, so convincingly that Harper felt a tremor of doubt inside her chest. What terrified her most wasn't that he was lying, it was that he had practiced lying. That evening, while Marcus cooked dinner, Harper quietly checked the security cameras at her office using the app on her phone. The footage had been wiped. Every file from the previous week simply gone, replaced with a system message she had never seen before. She hadn't deleted anything, and no one else had access to the system except her, unless the password had been changed behind her back. The fear that had been simmering beneath the surface finally crystallized into something sharp and undeniable. Marcus wasn't helping her. Marcus wasn't worried about her. Marcus was creating a version of her that didn't exist, a broken, confused version. A version who could be manipulated. A version who would willingly sign over everything she owned because she believed she could no longer be trusted with it. And the worst part was how patient he had been. How methodical. How calculated. Harper realized then that whatever story Marcus was constructing about her would continue to grow until she believed it herself. Unless she stopped him. But she couldn't accuse him without proof. She couldn't run without understanding the full scope of what he was doing. She had to be smart. She had to be quieter than him, faster than him, and far more dangerous than he imagined she could be. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, Harper sat alone in her home office. She looked around the room, her framed licenses, blueprints, awards, degrees, everything she had earned, everything someone was trying to take from her by slowly twisting her reality. She made a silent promise to herself. She would not let anyone rewrite her life, and she would not let Marcus win. But she had no idea then just how far his plan had already gone, or how deeply he had embedded himself into the cracks he spent months creating. And the first real clue came the very next morning, when she woke to find her car missing from the driveway and Marcus claiming she had moved it the night before. Harper stared at the empty space where her car should have been. Feeling the familiar wave of confusion Marcus always seemed ready to exploit creeping up the back of her throat. But this time she pushed it down and forced herself to think clearly because she remembered exactly where she had left the car, remembered the weight of her keys, remembered locking it before going inside, and she knew without question that Marcus was lying when he told her she must have taken it somewhere and forgotten. The easy way he said it, the relaxed posture, the subtle way he watched her face for any sign of doubt made her realize that the missing car wasn't the beginning of the plan, but simply the next step in a sequence he had built long before she had noticed. She spent the morning pretending to search for the vehicle, pretending to question herself, pretending to accept his calm reassurance. But inside she was memorizing everything: his tone, his timing, his movements, because she needed to understand how deep he had already sunk into this twisted narrative. While Marcus worked in his home office, Harper called her insurance company from inside the pantry where the signal was weak enough to make the call appear accidental if he checked the logs. They confirmed the car had been reported stolen an hour earlier by someone who used her name and her policy number, someone who knew every detail necessary to impersonate her, someone with access to her files, someone like Marcus. The realization sent a cold ripple down her spine, but she didn't panic because she couldn't afford to. She thanked the representative, hung up, and quietly opened her hidden folder in the cloud of folders she'd created the night before. She dropped a new file into it, Car Theft Timeline. Harper decided she would log every strange event as evidence, even if the entries made her feel like she was mapping her own unraveling. She had to know what pieces were hers and what pieces were planted. Later that night, after Marcus had gone to bed, Harper checked the GPS on the car through the manufacturer's app. The tracker was offline, disabled. She didn't know how he had done it, but she was sure he had. When she returned to the bedroom, she found Marcus sleeping with the peaceful expression of someone who believed he was winning. She lay awake next to him until dawn, replaying everything from the past months and finally connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. The next few days were an escalation, each event more disorienting than the last. A client emailed her asking why she had canceled their upcoming site inspection when Harper knew she never canceled it. Her bank notified her of a failed attempt to access her business accounts from a different device. Her office lease manager called to confirm her written notice of termination, something she had never sent. Every incident seemed designed to isolate her, destabilize her, or create a record of incompetence that could later be used against her. And Marcus was always ready with a patient, sorrowful look, as if the world were finally witnessing what he had supposedly known for months, that Harper was losing her grip on reality. But Harper wasn't as alone as Marcus assumed. On the fourth day since the car disappeared, she pretended to leave for a meeting and instead circled the block on foot before slipping into the backyard of her neighbor and closest friend, Leila Grant. Leila was a nurse, someone trained to read signs of manipulation and stress, and Harper had chosen her carefully because she needed someone who would not dismiss her concerns as paranoia. Harper told Leila everything she could without raising suspicion, describing the missing items, the altered documents, the fabricated cancellations, and Marcus's increasingly controlling behavior. Leila didn't question her sanity. She questioned Marcus's motives. Together they built a secret communication plan, a backup phone hidden in Leila's shed, and a schedule for discreet check-ins disguised as walks or errands. Harper felt a flicker of control return, a reminder that she wasn't as powerless as Marcus hoped she would be. That same night, she returned home and found Marcus sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of wine waiting for her. He didn't greet her immediately. He simply watched her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Not pity, not disappointment. Something colder, something calculating. He mentioned casually that he had scheduled an evaluation for her with a specialist, a cognitive decline expert, because he was worried things were getting worse. Harper kept her face blank even as her mind screamed. She realized then what the endgame was. He expected a medical record documenting mental instability. If he had that, he could challenge her business license, claim financial mismanagement, petition for control of her company, her accounts, her properties. He could portray himself as the supportive husband forced into a heartbreaking role of caretaker. And once she was legally diminished, she would have no way to fight back when he took everything she had built. Harper nodded gently, pretending to accept his concern, pretending to appreciate the help. But inside, she was preparing for the next phase. She needed proof, undeniable proof, that Marcus was orchestrating every one of these incidents. And she needed it soon because once the evaluation happened, Marcus would accelerate his plans. The next morning, she woke before him, slipped into her office, and placed tiny adhesive tracking dots, micro RFID tags on the corners of her important documents, her laptop, her notebooks, even the spare keys she kept hidden. She also installed a secondary shadow backup on her work computer that recorded every access attempt, every keystroke, every login. If Marcus tried to tamper with anything now, she would know. Later that day, the trackers began pinging. Her office keys moved while she was miles away. Her business contracts were picked up and put back hours before she returned home. Her laptop was accessed at 2:14 p.m. even though she had left it locked in her work bag. And every ping, every movement, every digital trace pointed in the same direction, Marcus. That night she checked her hidden cloud folder. The files were stacking up. Proof was forming. But the most disturbing alert came at 3:07 a.m. when she woke to a soft vibration on her phone. One of her trackers had just pinged again, this time from inside the garage. Something of hers was being moved at that exact moment. And Marcus wasn't in bed. Harper moved silently through the dark hallway. Her heart beat steady but sharp as she listened for any sound from the garage, aware that Marcus had started acting with a confidence that came only from believing she was already psychologically defeated, unaware that the woman he was trying to break had begun piecing together every one of his moves. She had left the door to the garage slightly ajar earlier that evening when retrieving a toolbox, and now that thin sliver of space was enough for a soft glow to spill into the hallway. She stepped closer, slow and controlled, not out of fear but out of calculation, because she needed to know exactly what Marcus was doing with her belongings at 3 in the morning. When she reached the door and peered through the crack, she saw him crouched beside a large storage bin, the kind with a locking lid, and inside it were neatly ranged stacks of her documents, contracts, bank statements, property titles, items she kept in separate secure places, items he should not have even known existed unless he had been searching her office and her briefcase when she was out. He removed certain papers, examined them under the work light, then returned them with careful deliberation before adding new sheets that she recognized instantly as duplicates, forged copies with small but dangerous alterations, missing signatures, changed dates, amounts that differed just enough to cause suspicion during an audit. Marcus wasn't destroying her evidence. He was constructing a narrative of financial instability, a web of inconsistencies that would unravel her entire professional credibility. Harper knew she couldn't confront him yet. She slid back from the door, returning to the bedroom moments before Marcus re-entered, his breathing slow and even as if he had simply woken to get water. He climbed into bed, turned away, and within minutes pretended to be asleep. Harper lay beside him, her mind racing not with panic but with strategy, because watching him fabricate her downfall had confirmed that she was not imagining anything, that this was no misunderstanding or overreaction. This was sabotage, intentional and patient, designed to end with her handing everything over for the sake of protecting herself. The following day, Harper executed the next step of her plan. She sent herself a series of encrypted emails with timestamps, photos of the altered documents, and logs from the tracking system, then forwarded each file to an off-site storage vault she had set up under a different name years ago when she first began her business, a safety net she had almost forgotten existed until she started digging. She also backed everything onto two physical drives, one hidden in Leela's garage, another in the trunk of Leela's car taped beneath the spare tire. She needed redundancy, layers of truth Marcus couldn't erase. That afternoon, Marcus announced that her scheduled cognitive evaluation had been moved up to the end of the week due to new concerns. He spoke gently, the same practiced gentleness that made her skin crawl, and Harper felt her suspicion sharpen into certainty. He had accelerated his plans because he believed she was unraveling faster than he expected. But she wasn't unraveling. She was documenting. She was observing. She was preparing. On the second night after she had found Marcus in the garage, she received another alert from her tracking system. Something in her office at work was being accessed. At first, she assumed Marcus had driven there, but his car was still in the driveway. That meant he had given someone else access. Harper changed direction mid-route during her drive home, deciding she needed to see who was inside her office. When she parked a block away and approached the building on foot, she saw a cleaning company van that didn't belong to her usual service. A man she didn't recognize exited her office carrying a small box under his arm. Harper lowered behind a parked SUV, watching as he placed the box into the back of his van. Her instincts told her that the box held something Marcus wanted removed or replaced, something he didn't want her to find. The man returned inside, and Harper used those seconds to snap photos of the van, the logo, the license plate, the timestamp. When the man came back out again, she stayed hidden until he left the parking lot, then used her work key to quietly enter her office. The first thing she noticed was that her desk drawers were slightly misaligned, the subtle sign of someone rifling through them with enough care to conceal but not enough expertise to disguise it fully. She checked her file cabinet next and discovered that several folders had been pulled out and returned in a different order. But the biggest shock was her safe in the corner. It wasn't open, it wasn't forced, but it was wrong. The hinge was slightly misaligned, meaning someone had picked it or used a duplicate key. She opened it to find that the original property deeds she kept protected at all costs had been replaced with copies that contained errors that could lead to legal disputes, audits, or challenges to her ownership. Someone was rewriting her entire financial world piece by fragile piece. Harper left the office quickly, not wanting to trigger any alarm that might signal she knew what was happening. When she returned home, Marcus was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, looking up with the same gentle concern he had perfected. He made a remark about her looking tired, and she responded with the same soft, compliant tone she had been using for days, pretending to accept his guidance, pretending to be exactly the confused woman he wanted her to become. That night, after he fell asleep, Harper mirrored the exact smile he had given her earlier, because now she understood everything. Marcus wasn't just manipulating her. He wasn't just sabotaging her business. He had partners, people helping him access places he couldn't go himself, people who were being paid, promised, or persuaded to assist in dismantling her life. And if Marcus had accomplices, then this was far bigger than a greedy husband trying to steal assets. It was an organized effort with a timeline, a goal, and likely an end game that had nothing to do with her well-being. Harper barely slept. She spent the night analyzing every action Marcus had taken over the past months, mentally mapping out what he still needed to do before his plan was complete. And when the sun finally rose, she realized something chilling. Marcus wasn't just trying to convince her she was losing her mind. He needed other people to believe it as well. Because once enough evidence existed, once enough records showed her confusion, once enough contradictions appeared in her financial and professional history, she would look exactly like the unstable, incompetent person he claimed she was. And no matter how hard she fought, no one, not the courts, not her clients, not the medical evaluator, would believe she was sane. Harper knew she had to act before Marcus made the next move, but she was already too late. Because when she walked into the kitchen that morning, Marcus set down his coffee, looked at her with a deep, sorrowful sadness, and told her that he had spoken to 3 of her clients, 3 people she trusted, and shared his concerns about her cognitive decline. He said they agreed that something was wrong, and Harper knew, instantly and with absolute clarity, that Marcus's trap had already begun to close. Harper felt the weight of Marcus's words settle into her like a physical force because she knew what it meant when he claimed her clients agreed something was wrong. It meant he had spent weeks, maybe months, preparing them for this moment, planting seeds through small comments, concerned tones, subtle suggestions, nudging them bit by bit toward believing that Harper was slipping. And now their doubt, manufactured and deliberate, had been weaponized against her. She didn't react outwardly, didn't challenge him, didn't ask who he had spoken to, because she knew that would only feed the image he had crafted of her as unstable and defensive. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if absorbing devastating news. giving him exactly the expression he wanted to see because the only leverage she had left was the illusion of vulnerability. Marcus reached out to touch her shoulder, offering comfort with a soft, pitying smile that made her stomach twist because it no longer looked like affection, it looked like victory. As soon as he left the room, Harper slipped outside and followed the plan she and Leela had created. She walked toward the corner market, pretending to check her messages as she passed a small hedge where Leela waited out of sight. Without looking directly at each other, Harper dropped a small flash drive into Leela's open tote bag as she passed. Inside it were the latest recordings, timestamps, altered documents, and photos of the man from the cleaning van. Evidence, real evidence, the kind Marcus couldn't touch. That night, Harper returned home to find Marcus sitting at her office desk in the living room, sorting through her mail as if he had every right to examine it before she did. She approached with deliberate calm, silently observing which envelopes he lingered over. She noted the bank statement he kept too long, the insurance notice he hid under a magazine, and the thick packet from her accountant that he placed on the far end of the desk, too far from her reach as though it were dangerous for her to open. She asked him if everything was okay in the soft, uncertain tone he had come to expect, and he smiled, telling her he was just helping because she seemed overwhelmed lately. He said it with such smooth confidence that Harper knew he believed his version of events was nearly airtight. Later, alone in the closet pretending to organize clothes, Harper found something new, a voice recorder hidden beneath a folded stack of sweaters. Its tiny blinking light told her it had been recording for hours, capturing conversations she never knew were being monitored. She leaned in closer, scanning it for signs of tampering, then noticed a second device taped inside the laundry basket. Marcus was building evidence of her irrational comments, her confused statements, anything he could splice and frame into a pattern. She didn't touch the devices. She simply memorized their positions and returned everything exactly as she had found it. She needed him to believe she remained oblivious. The next day, Harper met secretly with an attorney recommended by Leela, someone discreet, someone accustomed to cases involving manipulation and property theft. To maintain the illusion of normalcy, she drove Marcus's car instead of her own because hers was still missing and parked several blocks away, slipping into the office like a shadow. The attorney, a woman named Rowan Pierce, reviewed the files Harper had gathered and immediately recognized the pattern: systematic destabilization, tactical incompetence creation, asset redirection, and pre-institutionalization staging. Rowan told her that men like Marcus didn't just want money, they wanted control, and their success depended on perfect timing. She warned Harper that Marcus would likely escalate soon, because once she met with the evaluator, he would need additional incidents to reinforce his claims. Harper left the office with a mixture of dread and determination, clutching Rowan's card like a lifeline. That night, Marcus was unusually affectionate, cooking dinner, opening wine, complimenting her appearance, behaving almost like the man she once thought she married. And Harper understood that this version of him wasn't kindness, it was strategy. She played along, laughing at appropriate moments, keeping her tone light, making herself appear relaxed and unsuspecting. But later, when she stepped into the bathroom, she noticed her toothbrush damp even though she hadn't used it since morning. She noticed her medication bottle, Simple Vitamins, shifted on the shelf, and when she opened the cabinet, she found the old prescription she'd taken years ago for anxiety sitting near the front, even though she knew she had stored it in a drawer downstairs. Marcus wasn't just monitoring her now. He was preparing the groundwork for the next step: chemical justification, pharmaceuticals, proof of instability through medication misuse. Harper removed nothing. She touched nothing, but her pulse tightened with urgency. A few hours later, when Marcus went to bed, she stayed up and reviewed her hidden backup on her laptop. The keystroke tracker showed that while she was at the attorney's office, someone Marcus had tried to access her work computer again. He had also attempted to open 2 of her cloud folders, and the system flagged an attempted login from an IP address not belonging to their home network. He was growing reckless, desperate, accelerating the timeline because he felt her evaluation approaching. The next morning, Marcus informed her that her sister, Naomi, had called him expressing concern about Harper's recent behavior, which Harper instantly recognized as another lie because Naomi was living in Europe and had barely spoken to Marcus in a year. He was fabricating witnesses now, manufacturing corroboration to strengthen his narrative. Harper couldn't confront him. She had to let him think the deception was working. But she also knew she was running out of time. That afternoon she met with Leela again. This time in the alley behind the community garden. Leela handed her a burner phone and a folder of printed screenshots showing that the cleaning company never belonged to a registered business. The plates were traced back to a rental service, paid in cash. Whoever Marcus had hired wasn't a random cleaner. He was a professional. Harper felt her pulse steadying into something cold and intentional because Marcus wasn't just manipulative, he was dangerous. And he had people helping him execute a coordinated plan. That night, while Marcus slept, Harper tested the lock on her window, ensuring she had an exit point if things went wrong. She loaded the burner phone with emergency contacts, stored copies of all evidence on a drive she taped behind the headboard, and kept a small bag ready under the bed. Then she crawled back beside the man who had been systematically dismantling her life and pretended to sleep as he shifted slightly, his breathing changing just enough to tell her he was awake too. Lying still, calculating his next move in the darkness. Harper knew the trap was close to snapping shut, and Marcus believed she wouldn't see it coming. He was wrong because she already saw the edges closing, already heard the distant click of the final mechanism locking into place. What neither of them knew was that the next morning would shatter the illusion for both of them, because when Harper stepped onto the porch to retrieve the mail, she found a plain envelope with no return address, an envelope that held a single photograph. A photograph of Marcus meeting secretly with someone she recognized instantly. A man who should never have been in contact with her husband. And suddenly she understood that Marcus's scheme wasn't just about stealing her assets. It was about something far more dangerous. Something she wasn't supposed to survive. Harper stared at the photograph, her fingers tightening as she absorbed its implications, because the man standing beside Marcus in that dim parking garage was someone she knew from a case she had worked on years earlier. A man named Cole Mercer, who had been terminated from her firm for falsifying financial reports and who had threatened her during the investigation when she refused to cover for him. Seeing him now, smiling beside Marcus, as they examined what looked like a set of documents, snapped the final piece of the puzzle into place. Marcus hadn't simply stumbled into the perfect plan to dismantle her life. He had help from someone who held a personal grudge, someone who understood the legal system, the financial networks, and the precise vulnerabilities Marcus needed to exploit. She realized that Marcus had been coached from the beginning, taught how to stage confusion, inconsistencies in her paperwork, coached on psychological manipulation techniques, and even instructed on which medical professionals to push her toward. Harper felt the jolt of fear, but also clarity, because now she understood the scale of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about stealing her assets. It was about permanently discrediting her so she could never expose Cole again. She stepped back inside the house with the envelope hidden in her pocket, adopting the same day's demeanor she had perfected. But Marcus was already watching her from the kitchen doorway with an expression that told her he sensed she was getting harder to control. He asked her if she was feeling okay, and she responded with the same soft uncertainty he expected, letting him guide her to the table where he slid a stack of documents toward her. He told her they were updates he needed her to review. Nothing important, just small adjustments to their accounts. Harper flipped through the pages slowly, recognizing immediately that they were legal instruments disguised as routine forms. One page authorized shared access to her business accounts. Another permitted emergency control in case of incapacitation, and one in the middle, folded slightly differently than the rest, granted Marcus temporary guardianship should she be deemed mentally unfit. Guardianship, the final step, the one that would let him institutionalize her, seize everything, and silence her permanently into the guise of psychiatric care. Harper kept her expression soft, confused, compliant, and told him she would review them later because she felt too overwhelmed at the moment. Marcus accepted this, though barely, and his forced smile told her he was running out of patience. That night Harper prepared for the final phase. She sent Rowan the photograph of Marcus and Cole along with timestamps, then forwarded every piece of evidence she had. She didn't tell Rowan that Marcus planned to have her sign the guardianship forms soon because she didn't want to put anything in writing that Marcus might intercept. Instead, she asked Rowan to meet her the next morning at her office before the evaluation appointment Marcus had scheduled. Harper stayed awake most of the night listening to Marcus move around the house, hearing drawers open and close softly, hearing the faint click of doors as he checked the locks and the windows. Around 3 in the morning, he opened their bedroom door and stared at her for a full minute before quietly walking away. And Harper forced herself not to move, not to react, not to let him see the strength she still had. When dawn finally came, Harper dressed calmly, keeping her bag hidden beneath her coat as she made coffee with the same mechanical slowness she had practiced for weeks. Marcus appeared behind her with a soft smile and placed his hand on her shoulder, telling her he would drive her to the evaluation to make sure she wasn't distressed. Harper nodded, thanked him, and followed him to the car with steady steps. But she never got inside. Instead, she told him she had forgotten something, slipped back inside, and climbed out the kitchen window she had pre-unlocked during the night. She sprinted behind the house, through the neighbor's gate, and into the waiting car where Leela sat gripping the steering wheel, already shaking from adrenaline. Harper climbed in, slammed the door, and Leela took off before Marcus could circle the house. They drove straight to Rowan's office, where Rowan was waiting with 2 investigators she had hired after reviewing the evidence. Harper handed over the photograph and the flash drive, explaining everything she hadn't dared to put in writing. Rowan listened intently, then informed Harper that they were already preparing an injunction and that they had a judge ready to review the evidence within the hour. When Harper mentioned the guardianship forms Marcus had given her, Rowan stiffened and explained that guardianship filings combined with claims of mental instability were often used in financial exploitation schemes. But what Marcus didn't know was that any attempt to submit forged or coerced documents would open him up to immediate criminal charges. As Harper signed her report, Rowan's phone buzzed with an alert. Marcus had reported Harper missing. He told police she was delusional, unstable, and had run off without her medication. Harper felt a cold chill as she realized Marcus was initiating the final step of his plan. But he wasn't the only one prepared. Rowan contacted the police directly, sending them the evidence packet, recordings, altered documents, and photograph of Marcus meeting with Cole. Within 30 minutes, the officers who had been heading to Harper's home pivoted to investigate Marcus instead. Meanwhile, Rowan instructed Harper and Leela to stay inside the office with the blinds closed while she coordinated the legal response. Hours later, as sunlight shifted across the room, Rowan returned with news that the judge had issued an emergency protective order preventing Marcus from accessing any of Harper's assets or claiming guardianship. She also informed them that police had located Marcus's rental storage unit, the place where he and Cole had staged the manipulated documents and recovered equipment, including scanners, signature templates, and drafts of statements claiming Harper was paranoid, erratic, and incompetent. The trap Marcus built for her had become the evidence that would eventually imprison him. But the most startling revelation came when Rowan revealed that Cole Mercer had already fled the state earlier that morning, likely realizing Harper had finally exposed their scheme. Harper felt a surge of exhaustion and relief, knowing the danger wasn't fully gone but believing, for the first time in months, that she would survive. 2 days later, Marcus was arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, attempted coercion, and evidence tampering. Harper watched from a distance as officers led him to the car, his face contorted with disbelief, unable to understand how the woman he had tried to convince was losing her mind had outplayed him. Her home was searched, the recording devices collected, the forged documents seized, and every step he had taken was documented for prosecution. Harper stood beside Leela and Rowan outside the courthouse, breathing air that finally felt real again. She knew recovery would take time, that trust would come slowly, but she also knew she had reclaimed her life. She had uncovered the truth, exposed the conspiracy, and protected everything she had built. And as she looked at the sunrise reflecting off the courthouse windows, she realized something profound. Marcus had tried to make her think she was crazy so she would surrender her assets, her reputation, her identity. But instead, he had awakened a strength in her that he never anticipated, a clarity sharper than fear, and a resilience he would never be able to destroy. Harper walked forward, ready to rebuild,